Hello and welcome to this AC Education presentation for teachers on supporting children and adolescents who've experienced bereavement and loss. My name is Christina Enright. I'm a child and family psychotherapist specialising in trauma and attachment and also freelance trainer for AC Education. So before I start, I just want to share my screen with you so you can see my PowerPoint. Okay, so when I was asked to present this webinar for AC Education, I was presented with a number of questions posed by teachers. So I'm just going to go through those with you because they form the session content. So it was asked, if I receive the news that a child has lost someone close to them, what do I say to the child? What shouldn't I say? And what should I say to the other children to help them to understand and support their peers? In this climate of social distancing, how do I provide comfort to a child who's distressed over the death of a loved one? And how do I deal with negative behaviour from a child who may be pushing the boundaries following the death of a loved one? And I've added in this one just for us to think together about. So it's other losses that children may be experiencing due to the coronavirus lockdown and them re-entering school in the next couple of months. Children may endure a range of different losses in childhood. It could be the loss of a direct family member, such as a parent, grandparent, or a sibling, or parents through divorce or separation. Extended family members or friends may move away and the child may not be able to maintain contact. Pets are important attachment figures for children, and the experience of the loss of a pet may be the first time a child encounters bereavement, and the impact of this can be just as immense as losing a person who's close. The family may fall into hard times and become homeless, in which case the child loses their secure base, or the child may encounter health problems and disability and loss of function. At the moment, with the coronavirus situation, preparations and rituals for transition from primary to secondary school may be lost because the child is not able to finish out their full year of primary school. And these rituals are very important as they act as containers for the difficult emotions that we face during times of change and transition. For example, anxiety is quite a normal emotion when we're faced with a new situation. And the rituals help the child to navigate these transitions by helping to manage the emotions. So the predictability and stability afforded by many of the things I've just talked about for the child may be undermined by the situation they find themselves in. So I'm going to talk a bit about children's development and its relationship with bereavement and loss. So we know that children of different ages and stages respond to loss differently. And even though a child's development progresses through different stages, each child is different and will mature at a different pace. And also children below the age of 5, we know experience separation is profoundly anxiety provoking and distressing. They don't have the cognitive sophistication to be able to make sense of what it means for someone to die and that death is final. And younger children also process information in a different way from older children. They use something called magical thinking. And this dictates that to the child that whatever they think or whatever they wish to happen or whatever they imagine can actually happen in reality. So a current example of that would be that a child might believe because they didn't wash their hands properly, they caused somebody close to them to become sick. So that's something to watch out for. So this is unrealistic sense of responsibility that children can carry about things that happen. And from the age of 5, children are really just beginning to grasp the meaning of death. And as their cognition matures, they begin to really understand death as final and that the person is not coming back. And adolescents are going through quite a complicated transition of development into adulthood. And when they experience bereavement on top of all of those changes, which bring a certain amount of turmoil, then it can make a bereavement even more difficult to deal with. So let's talk a bit about the theories of grief, because this can really help us to make sense of how the children are feeling or how they might be behaving after they've experienced a bereavement or loss. So there's a number of different theories which are helpful for this. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross was a psychiatrist in the 1960s, and she described the five-stage model of bereavement, where people go through a series of stages in a linear fashion, from denial to acceptance. And this was the dominant theory right up until relatively recently. However, it's now seen as probably trying to somehow neatly package what is a very complicated process, and that some people may experience some of these feelings and some of these stages, but certainly not everybody will. Bowlby was the founding father of attachment, and his work was looking at the impact of separation and loss on babies, infants, and young children. And he identified 4 different stages from his observations. The initial stage being shock, as the baby or the child realizes that they're separated from the attachment figure. And then a natural process of seeking and searching and yearning for that person in order to try and reestablish connection and contact. And if this fails and the parent doesn't come back, then the child will go into despair, they will shut down, they will withdraw, and they will not attempt to seek a connection. However, if there's the availability of a new attachment figure for the child, and they help the child to build a new relationship to meet their needs, then the child will begin to reorganize and recover from the loss. Class extended Bowlby's work with the continuing bonds model, and he talked about rather than forgetting about the person, moving on, leaving them behind, getting over them, what we do is we relocate that person in our emotional or in our mental world. We somehow find a way of holding on to what was the essence of that person, to holding on to the relationship. So the continuing bonds model tells us that actually attachments endure long after somebody has died. And this is particularly observable in cross-culturally, because many cultures maintain relationships with ancestors through many generations. So what we do is try and find ways of maintaining connection with the person. So it might be through the mementos that we've gathered after their death that we re-engage with from time to time to help us to re-establish connection. And the dual process model helps us to understand those kind of psychological shifts we make between being in our grief one moment, feeling the depths of it, feeling the anxiety and the sadness, and then in another moment becoming quite functional. So, for example, moving to doing some housework or doing something practical. And this is our way of experiencing the grief, but also using coping strategies, because it's as if our minds can only cope with a certain dose of the reality of the loss in any moment. And you'll see this with children, where they may be feeling incredibly sad in one moment, and then a few moments later they go back to happily playing. And children need to understand that that's okay, that's very much what happens when we're sad about the loss of somebody, and a person would like to see us having a happy times as well as sad times. So we know from looking at the theory of bereavement and loss that there's no right or wrong way to grieve. It's very much an individual process. But just like adults, children experience a range of emotions in relation to bereavement and loss, such as fear, anxiety, confusion, sadness and grief, frustration and anger. And as children respond differently to the news of bereavement and loss, some will ask lots of questions and want to talk about it openly. Other children may struggle to feel the feelings, acknowledge and understand the feelings. Sometimes the shock of the news just shuts them down, and they might not be able to think, feel or speak about it. Such children might become withdrawn. Or the feelings might be too frightening to allow in. They may suppress or deny them. And they may only be able to feel the more powerful feelings, such as anger, because the more vulnerable feelings of despair and sadness may be too difficult for them to bear. And many children might want to talk about their experiences of bereavement and loss, but they might need help to talk about it because they don't have the vocabulary. They can't quite find the words. And this is where adults can be really helpful using a kind of reflective, wondering sort of engagement. So we might ask the child, I wonder if you're feeling sad right now. I wonder if you're thinking about your dad. I'm wondering if you're remembering the good times you had together. I wonder if you really miss your dad. So naming the child's feelings in that tentative way can be really helpful. It brings a sense of relief, emotional containment, and it can help the child feel validated in their feelings. For children who experience developmental trauma, and that's trauma that occurs from infancy onwards, any current losses they may experience really compounds those previous experiences of trauma for the child. And it can re-trigger any unresolved separations, losses, or abandonments the child may have had, making it difficult for the child to grieve in the here and now. And for these children who've had experiences of previous trauma, they may have problems with regulating their physiology, their emotions, and their behavior. And often the only way that they can express feelings of distress and anger is actually through their behavior, because they have problems with regulating themselves, can easily become distressed and find it very difficult to calm themselves down. So it's important that such children are surrounded by adults who really understand the difficulties that the child has, and to be able to offer safety through acceptance and understanding in the relationship, that the child is doing the best they can, and that the child will need help to learn how to better regulate their feelings. Once we create relationships with children where they can see that we accept their feelings, whether positive or negative, and we understand them, and we create safety in the way we respond. So rather than responding, crossly, we might feel cross with the child, but if we can try and regulate ourselves so that we respond to the child in a balanced, regulated way to help them to think about their feelings and how their feelings and thoughts relate to their behaviors, then over time we can help the child to learn how to regulate themselves better. And sometimes adults talk to me about asking questions about how to talk to children about difficult experiences. And sometimes there can be an anxiety around that. And I think it's because adults are often anxious about upsetting a child, or talking about something that they feel maybe is they're brutal truths that they think are too difficult for the child to face. However, it's important to understand that it's not the issue that's a problem for the child. It's whether they have adults available to them that can help them to think about them and talk about them. And so if we can regulate ourselves and balance ourselves in the face of talking to children about these issues, and trust that the child needs to know about what's happening, then we can help the child to be able to deal with the feelings that come up. And that really is important for helping children to become more resilient, to learn how to regulate their feelings. It's not through the avoidance of these subjects that children learn to regulate. It's actually when we help them to face them, and we help to regulate those feelings around those difficult experiences, that help the children to become more emotionally literate and more resilient. And I really like this quote from Ida Lashan: "A child can live through anything provided they are told the truth and allowed to share the natural feelings people have when they're suffering." For children who've experienced bereavement or loss, their whole world can be turned upside down. Nothing for them will ever be the same again. And life can feel pretty fragile and insecure. So it's important that some of the things that can be maintained as predictable and constant, and give the child back some sense of control, are really helpful for supporting the child through their grief. So maintaining routine and predictability, and school is one of the really crucial places for this, that promotes children's emotional containment and enhances their security. So you might want to check with the parent to talk to them about what's happened and how they might suggest that you support the child. So partnership working around child bereavement with parents is really important. And take some time with the child and let them know that you're aware of what happened. Because if you wait for the child to talk about it, they might not be able to do that. So just gently letting them know with no pressure to talk about it is really helpful. And listen and empathize if the child does want to talk. And let the child know that you're available for them to share whatever is on their mind, whatever questions they may want to ask, that you might not be able to answer all of their questions, but you're happy to hear them. And what else might you do to support bereaved children in school? Well, you might ask the child if they want their classmates to know that they've lost somebody special to them. And if they would, how would they feel comfortable with you sharing that information? And here's where we really respect children's entitlement to confidentiality. And that helps the child with regaining some sense of control if they're able to have a say in how information is shared. Plus, children, when they've had a bereavement, are often anxious about what other children might say or think about them. They're worried about being teased. They're worried that they might get upset in class. And so they have all of these worries that would be important for you to be able to explore with them to find out what is the best way for them to re-enter school and for them to be supported through that. You might ask the child how you best can support them through the school day. So would they need to have access to another adult for times when they might be struggling to concentrate in class, or they might be becoming dysregulated or upset? And is there a safe place for them to go where they can get some support and comfort? And you might ask the child what would be helpful, but they might not be able to think of anything. And here's where it's helpful to offer some ideas. So, for example, you might suggest to the child that they have a signal, a hand signal perhaps that they could use in class to let you know that they need some time out. So that would be something that would be understood between you and the child, and it helps to avoid the child drawing attention to themselves, because they can feel quite self-conscious about needing something for them that's different from the rest of the group. And in terms of the other children, it's helpful to talk through with them about what they might say to another person when somebody close to them has died, just to help them understand that, but also some coaching around what would be a helpful and supportive thing to say. Let the child know that it's okay to feel sad and also to play and have fun, that that person they love, who they've lost, would welcome their tears, but also like to see them having a good time. And for adolescents, it's likely that they will require a much more private response. So making sure there is somebody available to that young person on a daily basis, just to check in with them, to see how they're doing, and to maybe negotiate with them the school day in a way that would be most comfortable for them. So other ways that you might be able to support the child in school is to think about how children often find it easier to express their emotions through being creative rather than verbally. And so creating opportunities for the child to be able to talk about their feelings through writing letters, stories, drawing pictures, or identifying songs or music that might capture their experience of the person they've lost can be really helpful. And think about perhaps speaking to parents about how you might do some of these activities with the child in school, but explore whether it would be okay for the child to bring a photo or something that was special about the person to share with the rest of the class, and that will enable the child to be able to talk about their memories of that person, and just reconnecting with the continuing bonds model that we talked about earlier on, where children need, and all humans need, to be able to somehow retain the essence of the importance of that relationship with that person through life. And so giving children the opportunity to talk about the person and to be able to process their feelings and to share positive memories can really help the child navigate their grief. Could children make cards for the child and their family and send them? And would it be possible to hold a circle time with the theme of about losing someone or something special? And this would be of benefit to all children, not just a child who's bereaved. Children need help from adults to be able to talk about some of these difficult experiences in life. And sadly, grief and loss is a difficult reality for all of us. And so, by engaging with these conversations with children and thinking about and answering their questions and helping them to process some of the complex emotions, can really help these children to become more resilient in their ability to navigate some of these difficult experiences they're going to have in life. And also, importantly, the child's cultural and heritage and religious faith, that it's honoured in some way. So that could be done through creative rituals, either in the classroom or in the school. And this can bring a lot of comfort to a child because it really honours their heritage and validates those cultural differences in how we might mourn and grieve. And for children who are transitioning to secondary school, they will be missing out because of the corona crisis on and the preparation, familiarization, and the goodbyes that they would normally have an opportunity to go through. So are there ways that you can consider doing that with children, even though they might not be able to visit the new school, for example? Are there videos or photographs that that can be made available to them, just to prepare them and to familiarize them with descriptions of what to expect when they get there, how school life is going to be different than it was in primary school, and what sort of little tips and suggestions you can make to help the child to be able to settle in. And also, how can the child say goodbye to all of the people who were important to them in primary school, the staff, the other children, and the building itself? So there may be creative ways that you can talk to a parent about that will help the child to be able to say goodbye. So children will express a range of feelings in relation to their grief, and they may express those through acting out, through their behaviour, or internalizing those emotions. Through becoming quiet or withdrawn or shut down, or some children can become over compliant. So it's important to observe the child to get a sense of how they're dealing with those difficult feelings and to offer support as you think they need it. I see children's behaviour as communication, trying to communicate sadness, anxiety, anger. And anger is a natural response to loss. It's an understandable emotion when we feel somebody really important has been taken away from us. And behaviour is also the child's way of asking for support and containment. Sometimes those feelings are so overwhelming, they're too big for the child to be able to contain, and they're asking for an adult to help. And remember the children who've experienced trauma, because they'll struggle even more because of their difficulties with both physiological, emotional, and behavioral regulation. It will be much more difficult for them to be able to contain some of these complex and difficult emotions. So it's helpful to the child, rather than straight away correcting the behavior, to actually offer some curiosity and try and understand what emotions might be behind the child's behavior, what that behavior might be trying to communicate. And trying to understand that will really help the child to feel accepted and validated in those feelings. And over time, we can support the child to be able to develop other ways of expressing their emotions. Accepting the child's feelings, whether positive or negative, really builds trust in the relationship and helps the child to feel comforted. And through validating and empathizing with feelings, we can help the child to understand themselves better, to understand that those feelings are completely normal and healthy when they're going through a process such as grief as a result of a loss. And through that, the child will be able to tolerate those feelings better in themselves and over time learn to regulate them better. So many children enjoy the comfort of physical touch when we're upset. We know that. But we also know that some children may be touch sensitive or averse. And due to the corona crisis distancing regulations, there will probably be restrictions in how close we can be to each other and what sort of physical contact we can make with children. But it's important to know that we don't have to touch children to bring comfort to them. By being fully present with their feelings and with the intentionality that we're wanting to bring compassion and understanding, the child will feel that, they will sense that from us. Through conveying empathy, using facial expression, our intonation of our voice, our body posture, all of that will help the child to feel accepted and understood, and that we're with them there alongside them in their emotions. And really what's important about this is our ability to tolerate those emotions that the child expresses, particularly if they're negative emotions. If the child is feeling anger, can we accept that that's the child's emotion in that moment, and that anger is a really natural response to loss? Are we able to sit with the child's feelings and trust that being there present with intention, expressing empathy and compassion, that actually we'll be able to bring comfort to the child and be able to help them, rather than the sense that we somehow have to make it all better. So what matters most to children when someone dear to them has died or they've lost them is that they're surrounded with adults who maintain their sense of safety and security as much as possible. Adults who are able to manage their own feelings so as to protect the child from having to worry about them. And children won't feel safe in sharing their feelings if they're concerned about us getting upset. And adults who are available and responsive to support the child's expression of whatever feelings they have, whether sadness or anger, with acceptance, understanding and compassion. And there are a range of books available for children who've experienced bereavement and loss, which are really a beautiful way of creatively helping the child to think about and talk about and process their feelings in a child-centered way. They're available from tracysmith.com, and there are numerous books available from Amazon. And if you're concerned about a child and you feel you need further support or advice, or a parent might come to you asking for advice, there are a number of national organisations which are well placed to help to support families or schools where children are experiencing bereavement and loss. So thank you for listening to my presentation. I hope it will be of help to you when children return to school. Remember to take care of yourselves and to make sure that you make time for your own self-care and self-nurture. Thank you. Bye-bye.